Here's the Crosman 1400, also known as the 140. I was having a problem with this gun holding pressure. Basically, I couldn't pick the gun up without this handle falling down. Couldn't build up pressure on it. So I went and did a rebuild on it. But there's really not much out there, so I wanted to put a video out myself. Step one for these guns is usually taking the stock off. Now with this one and this variant, I have the safety here. You can see how I've already kind of started to take it out. This is kind of a really tricky piece to get out. Overall, the process isn't that tricky, but here's the piece. It's got this big void space right here for when it's, let's see, what is that going to be? It's probably on fire, I don't know. Yeah, that's when it's on fire. This little plug will be resting down in there, and when it's on safe, it's back up in here. Now you can also see there's a little bit of a channel cut into it there, and basically what you have to do is try to get this plug that's got a spring behind it. You gotta grab that and kind of lift it up. I ended up using a pick. I went in there with the pick next to the safety and gave it a little bit of a lift, and then you want to point your safety down. Okay, so what that'll do is, or you can face it forward towards the front of the gun, and what that does is it gets this this slot as far away from there as possible. I found that best was to point it straight down, but you could go forward as well. Anyway, your safety's out, and you want to be careful with this, guys, because, you know, here's my original safety from 60 or 70, whatever. And now it's in 3 pieces because I had no idea how to get it off. Put too much strain on it, and then it ended up breaking. I had to order up a new one. So, be nice to avoid that. Anyway, once you get the safety out, you can then take your stock off. That should slide right off. If you hadn't taken your safety out before this point, your stock wouldn't come off. It would get hung up. So now that the stock's off, just be careful. There's a washer stuck in here. Make sure you don't lose that. Okay, now we go to the front of the gun. There's a roll pin right here. So you'll need a punch and push that roll pin out. We'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll be back. Okay, there's that roll pin. I just punched it out. Now your front, this whole front piece should pop out. There's your hinge just came out. These old guns, sometimes you got to give them a little prying, little coaxing now and again to get them to do what you need them to do. There we go. Okay, put that there. Now your piston should come out. So with a good stiff yank, your piston should come out, okay? Most of the time, what you're going to be after is in here. This is a modified version, but most of the time you'll be after this this O-ring. There are upgrade kits, but you know, it's up to you how deep you want to get into it. So guys, before we move on any further, I think it's important to mention that if you're going to do any work to this, and if you're going to take this bar here loose or do any, you know, real surgery on your piston here, take note of the measurement, okay, between, say, the end here and the end of your piston, because you want that to be the same as it was when you took it out. That's a very important distance right there to get right. Now that we've got our stock off and our piston out, I'm going to remove my sights. I could have done this earlier, but I'm going to do it now because I'm going to have this gun upside down, and I don't want to beat up on anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove my sights. Now that we've gotten this far, I've got a bolt handle on mine. Other ones have slide covers. I'm going to take this bolt in the back, or sorry, this screw in the back out. It's a recessed flathead. Now with that out, you may or may not have a smashed plastic spacer in here. Okay, you've got to get that out before you can move on further, and it can be a real chore. So get a pick or a small screwdriver or something and get that out of there. I'm going to work on it until I get mine out, and I'll get back to you guys. Okay guys, here's that little plastic O-ring, that spacer that came out from back here. Once that is out, you can remove this rear plug, and that will allow you access to the bolt area, okay, which the bolt is just screwed in. Mine's got a little bend to it. And then your bolt should be able to come right out. Now your bolt's out. So a lot of you guys are probably very frustrated with this thing right now. Let me show you a little tip that I did. With the bolt still in the rifle, with these old guns, sometimes you have to kind of go around the problem a little bit. Now, this plug was still in there, and that little plastic piece was in there, which didn't allow me access to the breech bolt. But it did allow me a little bit of access to the breech bolt. So what I did was I got a very small screwdriver so I could get into that breech bolt, okay, and I just started to turn it and get it loose. Now when you do that, you can see the gun's kind of coming apart. Your barrel is going to separate from the rest of the rifle. Okay. There's that, there's the bottom. Now what I did was, since I still had this plastic piece in, I flipped it over and I got in there with a small screwdriver or whatever you can find, and then I felt for the bottom of this plastic plug and then gave it a tap and tap it all the way around and start moving it until you get it out. It's just, you got to work around that problem, otherwise you're going to drive yourself crazy trying to get this thing out. So work around the problem and then we'll get back on track. Okay guys, now that we're back, at this point you've got a completely clear barrel. So if you need to do some refinishing, or you wanted to clean the barrel really well, anything like that, now's a good time to do it. Also, you have access to your breech O-ring, your probe O-ring I mean, and might as well go ahead and replace that while you're in there as well. At this point I'm going to hit these two screws and take off my trigger group. We've got some lock washers on here, so make sure not to lose those. The next step I'm going to do is remove this stud right here, which for me means I'm going to take it out to the vise, wrap it in leather, clamp it down, and then get it turning. It should be in there pretty darn snug. Another way to do it is if you've got the right size nuts that will screw onto here, like this one. If I had another one of these, I could screw a nut against a nut and sandwich them together, and then use that to help break this loose. But I don't have another nut, so I'm going to go out and do that. And then the step right after that, while I'm down at the garage at the vise, is to remove this pin. And this is another pressed in pin. It's got threads both on the bottom and on the top. So one way to do this is to get a punch that fits down in between the threads, so you won't bugger up the threads. Hold it very steady and then tap it out. So I'm going to get that done, and when I get back this will all be loose. Okay, here's that pin, and you'll notice there's knurling on that pin, and that knurling, remember, it goes on the bottom. So when you go back for reassembly, you want this smooth, long, smooth area to go up from the bottom. I also took this loose. Now this is screwed into your valve assembly in here. Just little nickel knowledge. Spring pressure behind here, so as soon as this pin came out, I left this in so I could show you guys, but as soon as this pin comes out, your hammer spring is going to want to push this rear plug out of the way. So just be aware so you don't lose parts. Okay, there's that. Hammer. This piece here is, I forget which way this goes in. I'm going to have to check the schematics. But notice that this here little donut looking piece, it has some threading on it, and the threading, this threaded hole is offset to one side. So you want to make sure to put this back in the right way. One last piece that's in here is this little plug. It usually sits inside that little donut. And then the only thing left in here is your valve assembly. And what you want to do is get some kind of, say, a dowel or something that's not too, you don't want to get steel in there if you can help it. And you want to push your valve assembly forward. You'll be pushing against O-ring pressure. So you just want to take your time and maybe just give it a little gentle coaxing with a hammer on whatever rod you're using, and take that out of there. So I'm going to go ahead and back down to the shop and remove mine, and you do want to bring it forward. And now the neat thing is, once you get it forward enough to this point, if it doesn't slide free, you can come in with some type of tool and use this slot and bring it out the rest of the way instead of continuously banging on a rod. Alright, here's my valve assembly almost out all the way. Bring it out the rest of the way. And now you've got an empty pressure tube that you can go through the cleaning process with, and the rest of your valve assembly. You've got some very specialized parts in here. And you want to make sure that you keep them in the order that they're supposed to be in. Okay guys, so here's your valve assembly. You've got two O-rings here. You've also got quite a special O-ring down inside here, so make sure to keep that clean. The two halves can unscrew. I know I made that look easy because I went and I loosened it up a little bit. Looks like I got some dirt to clean in there. And then the spring. And that's really about it, I think. So here's all the pieces to your valve all disassembled. To get this little plastic guy out, what I ended up having to do was take a very small Allen key and lightly push it out from the front of the valve. And that's it. Now you've got a completely disassembled Crosman 140 or 1400. If you want to take the trigger apart, you've got two screws here, and then this plate comes off, and you can get into your trigger housing and mechanics and work through all that. So guys, one final tip on getting these two halves apart is if you're having trouble getting these apart, and don't use a pair of pliers on them. Find something like a vise, or and wrap half of it in leather. This is what I did. I brought down this old stud which screwed into here originally, screw it back in, clamp down this half with some leather in a vise or something like that so you don't bugger it up, and then use this as a fulcrum for leverage, and it should come loose after that.